Hi, I'm Kelly Vaughn, and this is Inside Indy. You witness a crime. So what do you do with that information? Do you tell the authorities, or do you keep it to yourself? We're going to talk about informing our police or snitching with Dave Rizal. Minister Dave Rizal, you are on the board for the Indiana Healthy Marriage and Family Coalition?
Yes.
Welcome to Inside Indy.
Well, thank you, Kelly. It's nice to see you again.
Before we get into the subject of to snitch or not to snitch, though I know there's a difference, tell us what IHMFC is.
Well, as its name, our name suggests, it's the Indiana Healthy Family and Marriage Coalition. We are a faith-based organization, not-for-profit organization, and we believe that marriage has spiritual roots. And although the Supreme Court and the law of the land has sanctioned same-sex marriage, we believe in marriage being one man and one woman, and that being the basis of the family. And so, about 12, no, maybe 15 years ago, the organization grew out of a horrible incident that involved an estranged husband who shot his wife while she sat in a driveway with her children and his children as well. This was out on the west side of Indianapolis, and then he left and went to Rochester, New York, and killed himself. Well, the sister who was killed was a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, and so the Sisters of Delta Sigma Theta formed a family life committee, and Dr. Ruth Lambert, who is a Delta, was the chairperson of that committee. And out of that committee and the work that they did to draw attention to violence in the family, the Indiana Healthy Marriage and Family Coalition was formed. And today we have affiliates around the state, in Elkhart, in South Bend, Michigan City, and places like that to, again, provide information through classes that are free to the participants for them to learn about what does it mean to have a healthy marriage, and what does it mean to have a healthy family. And so about 5 years ago, during our annual family conference, we focused on fatherhood. And the feedback from the community was so great that they wanted us to continue doing something in that vein. And so we developed what we call fatherhood forums. And we do them bi-monthly. Or rather every other month, and we pick different topics that are relevant to fathers. And one of the most popular topics has been helping fathers who have been incarcerated and then released, and how do they get back in with their families, and particularly with their children who, while they have been absent, have grown up without them. But the last two that we've done really have focused on police and community relations, which is a hot topic here in Indianapolis. And so out of that came the topic for the next Fatherhood Forum on November the 6th. And they're held at the 38th Street Library. And this topic has to do with the fact that the homicide rate continues to rise. And many of these homicides and murders over the last few years are unsolved because the police have no clues that point to the perpetrators. But they operate under the premise that somebody knows. Somebody in the community is connected to the perpetrator, and whether they're a family member or a neighbor or an associate, and those are the people who can help the police solve these murders if they would only speak up.
Right.
I was kind of really blown away a couple of weeks ago when I saw a news report about a drive-by shooting outside of a club out on the west side of Indianapolis off of Lafayette Road, that it was a birthday party for teenagers. And so the party goers were between ages of 11 through 16. And somebody drove by and shot 3 of them. So when the police showed up, several, and they were asking the kids questions, several of the kids got texts from their parents saying, don't tell the police anything.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, and that just blew me away, that these parents would discourage their children from participating in the investigation. Many of them probably knew something, but they didn't say anything because their parents told them not to.
Wouldn't that, though, because it is on record on a text, wouldn't that kind of be obstruction of justice?
Well,
Because you usually can't prove that I'm withholding something, but when somebody says don't say something.
right. Well, but the way they worded it, according to the report, is don't tell them anything other than your name. And so there's nothing wrong with that, because the only thing you're obligated to do is to identify yourself. And so if you tell them your name, you don't have to tell them anything else. Now, if you are actually called into court, then you stand the chance of perjuring yourself. But a prosecutor is not going to call you into court if they know you're not going to cooperate. So and we had already decided on this topic before that incident, but that just really points out how serious this is in our community when the criminals get away and nobody's holding them accountable.
So in that particular case, though, the parents' motive then is what? Their fear of retaliation against their child?
Right. And that is, there's a movement actually in the States, and it's spread around the world, to stop snitching. In fact, there was a rapper out of Boston who released a record about that, and then another rapper in Baltimore picked up on it and kind of changed the name and did a DVD called "Stop F-Word Snitching," and that one kind of blew up because NBA star Carmelo Anthony had a cameo appearance in the video. And so it spread and spread. And so, he later said, oh, it was just a joke. However, with his popularity, people were watching the video just because he was in it. But the message that the DVD put forth is, stop communicating or cooperating with the police. Yeah.
Now, I know a little bit about that story out in Baltimore. Do you know the other part of it where our former chief, Rick Height, and the police department got together and created their own...
Right, they did their own video.
Yeah,
right.
And I forget what the name of it, but it was a counter video. And I guess the original video spread across the country, and even their response to it became national, even though we didn't pick up on it. But I know exactly. I read the story when Height was in office, and
right.
And that was probably part of his. A lot of people looked at him as like, oh, this guy came from Baltimore, who's originally from Indiana, but he had done a lot of significant things out on the East Coast that people here had no clue about.
Right.
But yeah, I know very much what you're talking about. So is your forum is going to focus on snitching or informing what to do if you have info about a crime. So are you saying there's a way for me to divulge information without it being snitching? Or
well, actually, those terms sound like they're mutually exclusive, but they both mean the same thing. It's providing information to law enforcement so that they can act on it. And it has to be actionable information. It's not that, well, I think I know something, but if you actually know something, then it depends upon your perspective. If you go and inform the police about it, well, those who are of criminal elements, they're going to call that snitching. Whereas the police actually have, and law enforcement call it informants, And so either way, you're providing information that you possess that can help the police solve a crime. Now, those parents, as you intimated, told their children not to cooperate because of a fear that they might be victims of retaliation. And that does happen. So it is an honest concern. However, there is a way to inform anonymously. And we see it on news reports all the time. They'll end the story by saying, if you have information, and call Crime Stoppers at 626 TIPS here in Indiana. And so that particular service, it does not have caller ID. So whoever's calling, it doesn't identify your number and it doesn't identify your name. And so you can then talk to the operator and give them whatever information you have anonymously. And they can go and check it out and see if it's actionable. But even then, people fear that the criminals are going to figure out who the snitch was. Or if they can't figure out who the snitch is, then they just intimidate the whole community.
Right.
Yeah.
Which they ain't that smart, because
Yeah.
that's part of actually being stupid for committing the crime. But I could see where people would think but they're not that sophisticated to figure that out. Like, how would they know if you're writing an anonymous letter?
Well,
How would they know
exactly. But the thing is that there are certain facts that the criminals know are true, and they can kind of, boil it down to, well, who would know that I drive a certain kind of car, or
the process of elimination?
right, or who would know that my address is, or who would know the people that I hang out with, And so they can then, as you said, use a process of elimination and kind of identify who it might possibly have been. And the psychology of the thing is that that person who is the snitch then will kind of keep themselves out of the public eye so that they won't be found out. And in doing so, they're kind of identifying themselves, as one who possibly talked to the police. But the interesting thing about snitching is that it has some roots that go back to, early times in American, really like in the 1800s, when we had a proliferation of gangs from European immigrants. But it also goes back to slavery time, as far as Americans of African descent are concerned, because the slave masters would use brutality to extract information from the slaves about one that either ran away or who killed my cow, or whatever the infraction was. And so they would go and just be brutal to everybody in Slave Row until somebody gave up the information.
Wow, interesting. Okay, well.
And by the way, there's a book that discusses this. It's called A Snitch in Time.
A snitch in time.
A snitch in time.
A snitch in time. Okay. Well, we appreciate you coming on, Minister Dave Rozelle, who's talking about the Fatherhood Forum series at the library on East 38th Street. That's 5420 East 38th Street, and the date Monday, November 6th, from 6 to 8 p.m. We thank you so much.
Thank you
for joining us on Inside Indy, and we'll have more for you here in just a few. Thanks. And welcome back to Inside Indy. I'm your host, Kelly Vaughn, and we have a tremendous amount of talent in Indianapolis, right here in Indy. We know about the people out in Chicago and out in New York, but we have incredible talent here in our city. And I wanted to share with you one of those talents is Joanne Jones Cornett. She is the author of the book, The Last Colored Girl, and she's in our audience, in our studio today with us. Hello, Joanne. Thank you for coming on.
First of all, Kelly, praises to God for this opportunity, and thank you so much for allowing me to be your guest on Inside Indy.
We appreciate having you here, and you've written a book, something I haven't gotten around to doing myself in life, so this is just a major accomplishment. I know you've done a lot of things. You're an educator. administrator, actress, a model,
Right.
and now a writer of a book.
Yes.
Tell us about the book, The Last Colored Girl.
The Last Colored Girl is a memoir, and it takes you through the valley of poverty to the mountaintop of blessedness. It talks about my life growing up in the South, in Louisiana. And the book has cotton on the front of the book because I picked a lot of cotton in my day.
Wow.
And when I was school age, a lot of times the other students had an advantage over me because oftentimes I had to stay home and work in the cotton fields while the other students were in school. I remember one day we was having a test and I wanted to go to school so badly, but my dad didn't understand that and I had to stay home and work. But even with that, I still was able to compete. Even in my senior year, I think I had a 4.0 out of a 4.0 GPA.
Wow.
And so just favor from my teachers, help from others, and by the grace of God, I was able to come from where I was to where I am now.
Wow. Now, tell me about the picking of the cotton. Because first of all, you don't look like you're old enough to be a part of a generation that would have anything to do with that. So was this something common at a certain period in time? And how long ago was that?
We're talking probably in the 1960s, because I graduated from high school in 1967.
Wow.
And I
okay.
went off to college in the fall of 67. And the first time I came home for the summer, had to go into the fields and chop cotton. Needless to say, I went to summer school every summer after that. And then I would go home with anyone who would take me home with them so I wouldn't have to go home and work in the cotton fields. But my family was into the cotton business as sharecroppers. So they didn't own their property, somebody else owned the property. So basically that's how we paid for our housing, with the cotton crops. And most of the students my age probably picked some cotton in their earlier days, but then my family was one of the last families to come out of the cotton field.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. And prior to your time, tell us any history and in the book about your family in terms of as you said, chopping cotton.
Right.
Historically, how far does that go back in your family?
Okay, I really don't know because my grandparents owned property. And at one time, my parents owned property. But then our families used to sit around and our parents would tell us about family matters. And so my mom had said that one of the other cousins were envious because the grandparents had allowed them property and they burned the property down. So from that point on, then my parents were sharecroppers. So it could have been that the other family members owned property and they didn't need to go the sharecropping route.
Right, okay.
So I have a first cousin that's my age and they own property. So as far as how far back the family goes with the cotton picking and the cotton chopping, that I don't really know.
Okay. So what in the book are you wanting people to know about your life and your journey?
Well, first of all, it was a struggle, but yet I didn't give up. And so I want people to realize that even though their struggles or issues might be different from mine, there are still common threads to overcoming obstacles. And so by having faith in God and trusting in God and having parents who work really hard, and we were always around people who were willing to help. And so one landowner where we lived on their property, he owned a clothing store. So every year at Christmas time, we would go and get brand new clothes. That's about the only time we got new clothing. Other than that, I was wearing hand-me-down clothes. And there was one girl that rode the bus with me to school, Lenora Morgan. She was just my size, and she would always give me clothes. So I had plenty of clothes. They were hand-me-down clothes. Then by the time I got into high school, I learned to sew. And so I made some of the clothings that I wore. Plus, I had a job at school through Neighborhood Youth Corps. So during lunch and after school, I would clean the restrooms and then clean the buildings for the first graders. So I was able to earn some money and to be able to have some clothing.
Wow. Wow.
Yes.
What a journey.
Yes,
What a journey.
quite a journey. Yes.
Okay. And then college, I see there's in here you kind of break it down into your college experiences, your teaching career.
Right. When I entered 12th grade, then I began to get depressed because I was thinking, in this small town, there are no jobs. Don't have boyfriends, so I can't get married. And I was just at a loss as to what I was going to do. But there was a teacher at my school. I never was in her class. Everybody called her Cousin Mady Smith. She filled out a loan application for me for Grambling College and told me my application was ready. And so then I was able to go to college.
Wow.
And back in those days, I seldom wanted to smile because I had cavities in the front of my mouth, my teeth. And I remember the PE teacher said to me that I should get my teeth repaired or the cavities filled. And I didn't know that that was something I could do. And so once I got my loan for college, I had a little bit of money left over, came back to my hometown of Ringo, went to the dentist, and got the cavities removed and filled with good filling and everything. In fact, one tooth still has some of that original filling in it
Oh, wow.
from 1967. So again, you have people who are willing to help. And of course, I've worked for the school system 40 plus years, and I love helping people. And I keep in mind that there were teachers who helped me. There were days I'd be hungry and the teachers would give me food. And even when I went to college, I have college professors that I've stayed in contact with over the years because they always made us welcome at their homes, and so we just had lifetime friendship with teachers.
Okay.
And of course, my 5th grade teacher was one of my favorites. She had the last name as myself. Her last name was Jones. And so she would take it upon herself to buy me new clothes. When I went off to college, she bought me new clothes. I remember back then you had those tent dresses. And so I was able to wear some of the new and latest styles.
Okay. Okay. So it's
Yeah.
really about that's important along our journey. There's always somebody there to help, which means
Right.
we should do the same.
Right.
Where can we find The Last Colored Girl in your story?
The book is on Amazon.com. And for people here in the city, I usually have some books in the trunk of my car whenever I'm out and about.
All right.
And so most
You
of
and the rappers, it's okay.
Right,
It's okay.
so most of the schools I've been in to sub and things like that since my retirement, every school someone has either bought a book or said that they would buy a book. They might have bought it online or something, and
Okay.
so
Okay.
the book is online.
Okay, so look for The Last Colored Girl by Joanne Jones Cornett. And of course, I would think this would be a great read for students in the school system.
Well, one of the reasons I wrote the book is because I've taught thousands of students over the years. And I want people to know about the Lord. So there might be students who would not read a Bible, but then say to themselves, my teacher wrote this book, so I'm going to read this book. And so in the book, it tells how to be saved.
All right.
And so that's one of the things that I want young people to know is the Word of God. And so some of that is in there.
Okay.
I'm a
Okay.
Sunday school teacher, and so there's a chapter that
Okay.
has to do with guide for biblical living.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and inspiration spiritually and physically as well for those who read. The Last Colored Girl, Joanne Jones Cornett. Thanks so much for joining us
Thank you so much,
on
Kelly.
Inside Indy. And thank
right.
you for joining us. I'm Kelly Vaughn. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.